Boom.
Boom! What's up, everyone? Welcome to Simulation. I'm your host, Alan Sakyan. Very excited to be talking about incentive systems design. We have Raman Frey joining us on the show. Hello.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Really appreciate it. Very happy to have you because your work is so crucial at this pivotal moment in time as we figure out these incentive systems design, the structures, the frameworks, resource flows, all this kind of stuff. And for those that don't know Raman's background, Raman has been in the Bay Area for 18 years, starting companies, starting organizations. He did an international art gallery for 10 years. He also founded Good People Dinners, that link's in the bio, doing meaningful conversations for the last 7 years. 200 plus events have been hosted there. He's also partner at AH Global, links also in the bio. That's influencer marketing. We'll be talking about that a bit. And then also, most recently, he's authoring a book called Mount Commerce, Beginnings of Incentive System Design. Awesome, super pumped. The Medium also, all your writing on Medium's really powerful. Let's take this big history perspective to start on civilization. We find ourselves as stewards of Earth. And what's your current take on the synthesis of the human experiment?
Well, I think we're at a pivotal moment, I think, for most of our, it's a good question, it's a big question, but I think for most of our history, we have essentially not had the tools to really understand the level of interdependence of all of the life on Earth and our role in that interdependent system. And so in the last couple hundred years, we've developed the ability first to understand it, but that understanding is uneven. And secondly, to start to develop sort of the applied science that we are living in the Anthropocene. We are now shaping not just the geology, but we're shaping the future of all life on Earth. And so in that kind of scenario, I think with this accelerating levels of production, consumption, extraction, and an incentive system that says simply more is better, we are at this pivotal moment where we have to grow up as a species.
Yes.
We actually have to embrace the responsibility that's come with all the power that we've developed. And to do that, a lot of fundamental things are going to have to change. When I think of the way that most people approach, so I have quite a few friends who I think this has dawned on them. We have all this power, influence, insight. It's completely asymmetrical between us and the other species on the planet now. What they tend to do is come up with ways to remediate the damage. So it's the equivalent of saying here in San Francisco, gosh, there's a lot of homeless people, let's help them. And that's beautiful, compassionate, wonderful impulse to have. It's not very creative and it's kind of obvious. It's necessary, right? But you're downstream. Whereas the upstream thinker would go and say, why is our society constantly producing people who don't have basic resources?
Yes.
In a context of so much material excess, why are we producing so many homeless people on our streets? Shouldn't they at least be getting enough to survive? So you can apply that kind of thinking to environmental stewardship. You can apply it to gender equality. You can apply it to education. You can apply it to all kinds of things. And so the book that I'm working on, I'm trying to help people to think all the way upstream, right? And maybe start new streams themselves where certain incentives are not in opposition to, basic philanthropic impulse. So.
Okay, because when I take what you just said and I bring it in to a paraphrase, what I think of and why a lot of the reason why the show is called Simulation is because we're able to run these thought-provoking simulations. And one of the ideas is that as you talk about being upstream and talking about the root of these issues, we think about how to make a simulation where civilization didn't explode so quickly in population and ignorance at the same time as so much intelligence, so that if there was just that slowdown of, okay, we have a couple million people, we're going to be training every single child, every single seed giving it the right nutrients and watering that seed to become its fullest potential, its fullest flower, that we didn't have the issues that arose, that pressing the reset button and seeing that simulation flourish, I think, is a very, very beautiful way of potentially seeing things and also understanding how to get to the root, as you're saying. And you do think in that perspective. Ron, I know you wanted to chime in there for a moment.
Yeah, all this, like, this population, it's and all these people, it's purposeful. They knew damn well that we needed this population to create this world, that we no longer need all this population anymore. So good luck. I'm just saying. There's something behind all of this that, be fruitful and multiply. Go ahead.
So it's just a slow down to think perspective at the same time, and maybe towards later we'll get to multidimensionality with Raman, and we'll dive into some of that.
I think your point though is well taken in the sense that on one level there's no quick fix, and in a culture of instant gratification and conspicuous consumption, anytime we're faced with a challenge, we want an instantaneous fix. And when you get to a sort of systems level design of where you would like to steer civilization, you realize, you have to start really young. And probably first and foremost is just creating, and this is up to parents, I mean, this gets really foundational, creating emotional and psychological safety for children.
Yes.
And then all the way through adulthood, right, the ability to take a certain minimum standard. I'm a friend of Andrew Yang, who we had on the show, to take a certain minimum standard of subsistence and make that universal. Because the neurobiology of that, when you are constantly in fear for your own basic needs and the basic needs of everyone you love, you're frantic. You literally express a lower IQ. You're more prone to anger, you're a worse decision maker, you're less creative, you're less trusting, you're less cooperative. You basically have a diminished ability to manifest sort of these like highest human potentials.
Yeah.
And so, if you can create that for a good 20 or 30 years, if you could remove the specter of constant war, you can create populations that I think, hypothetically, would feel much more secure and be able to manifest not just twice as much, maybe 4 or 5 times as much of the human potential in the world, right? You've heard the expression, talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so by raising that floor on need and distributing opportunity as widely as possible, you maximize the manifestation of that human potential.
Of the talent.
Yeah, and most people want to do the right thing. And then there's a whole other conversation like how do you deal with this small percentage of people? I mean, we should in every way disincentivize, incentivize pro-social and disincentivize destructive behavior patterns.
Yes.
And we don't do a very good job of that.
So now we're starting to wander into this. So we initially illustrated this kind of like this cool reset that one could do and see how to slow down and think and evolve to not even have these ailments in the first place.
Right.
Now we're talking about reality that we live in, which is we have these ailments.
Sure.
And now we're talking about how to solve the ailments in the most practical ways. The first way that you indicated the seed of the mind in the first 6 months or even a couple years is just such a crucial time to have that love, compassion, basic nutrients, basic resources met for the child being born into the world, for them to actually be able to maximize their fullest flourishing. And when you increase that baseline, you enable all of that talent and creativity to emerge. And that only requires hopefully a couple decades potentially for it to be completely enabled in its fullest. And that would be fantastic. Now, you also point out this really fascinating thing to me too, which is that just the current incentive system that we have in many ways has made so many good things, right? Here's the nuance. We have so many good innovations and advancements that have occurred through this incentive system, but at the same time, you're also indicating that there has been this lack of the fullest creative potential unleashed of so many people still and whatnot. So let's talk about then that the current incentive system and how you perceive it, and then also the solutions that we have.
So the initial problem, so I've written the first draft of this book, which I'm tentatively calling Mount Commerce, the Beginnings of Incentive System Design. I like incentive systems because it's more than simply economic inducements. Those are extrinsic rewards and extrinsic punishments. We don't, as human beings, operate in that simplistic a way. We have social, we have neurobiological, there's so many different ways in which our behaviors are prompted, become habits, and are manifest. And so I think when we think about diversifying incentive systems, we need to think about all of these different aspects in engineering and architecting them, and then we need to deploy them in these little tiny experiments. So we'll take a few steps back. There's a very popular quote that's been going around from Bucky Fuller, essentially, to paraphrase, you don't change a system by operating within that system or reforming it, essentially. What you do is you try to create new systems that render something you find unsatisfactory obsolete. Obsolete, yeah. Right? And so the course of, if you read David Graeber's book, Debt, The First 5,000 Years, it's a wonderful polemic, which I think really broadens your awareness of what incentive systems have been the last 5,000 years, systems of commerce, credit, debt, those kinds of things. But in a really wonderful way, it gives you a sideways view across history of enormous diversity of human incentive systems. There have been things that have looked nothing like capitalism, but have included commerce, that have existed in different climates, among different peoples, in isolated pockets all over the world over the last 5,000 years. And in the last 300 to 500 years, in my opinion, we've essentially either jettisoned or assimilated almost all of that into capitalism. And capitalism is now the monoculture of commerce and a kind of tyranny. And that monoculture runs by a very, very simple ethic, right? Which is very crude and doesn't usually serve most people and planet well. And that ethic is more is better. Now, an ethic of more is better can produce staggering and accelerating contexts of abundance. It can raise poverty. I mean, I see over there you have Steven Pinker's, right, The Better Angels of Our Nature, right? When you raise the standard of living using capitalism, you do diminish violence, right? You do raise standards of living. And the quintessential story of that is we lifted everyone out of poverty and the rivers are poisoned, right? Here's your new devastated environment, and everyone can eat steak, right? And so that's the standard. And if we keep doing that, and if we lift everyone out of poverty that way, which isn't the only way, there will be on a burnt-out husk of a planet, like maybe within my lifetime. So I feel a lot of urgency about this, drawing people's attention to that monoculture of capitalism, demonstrating in the course of the book, using a bunch of metaphors, essentially there are things we've thrown away and there's room for invention, so we can diversify and experiment with incentives to get into what Kate Raworth, who's sort of an intellectual hero of mine, calls the donut economics. The green donut is her graphical image. And that means operating essentially below the ecological carrying capacity of the earth, not extracting more than it can sustain, but also raising the floor on desperate need and poverty. So what I'm advocating for is not just raising the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy, but also compressing the top. I think we should flip the script and go from worshiping billionaires as somehow demigods, right? There's this perverse hangover from the Protestant work ethic, which says your material wealth is demonstrative of your favor with God. And therefore, if you're a billionaire, you must have great wisdom on everything. Ethics, everything.
And that throws the humility out the window.
I love this guy.
And if
Yeah,
everybody,
I know.
if everybody comes up to you and is like this all the fucking
All
time,
the fucking time, no one.
you go crazy.
No one
Who wouldn't?
contradicts
I
you.
would.
Ego builds up so fast.
I would. You
Yeah,
know,
me too.
we're just people.
All of us. Yeah, we're
just
people.
people, right?
Yeah.
So we need to stop worshiping people for hoarding, and maybe call it that. And maybe the appropriate response to someone accumulating that much wealth would go from worship to concern.
Yeah.
And maybe what we need is something like a maximum wage. I mean, who really needs to earn more than $100 million a year, right? Isn't that perverse enough? If we said that the maximum tax bracket was 100%, not even marginal, everything you earn over 100%, maybe you get some say in it, but that goes into the commons.
Everything over 100 million.
A year.
Well, at the same time, there's a counter, which is that if the person's morals had evolved to such a degree, then they could potentially be adequate at redistributing that themselves. And that's a very interesting topic as well to consider. But you have so much more to shed. But
My
there was so much good
experience is
stuff there.
stewarding vast wealth is best done in groups with egalitarian operational sort of protocols. So in other words, now you're a billionaire, it's 5 years from now. You need, imagine, and you ask me before you become a billionaire, please keep me humble.
Yeah.
Please keep me sane.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
So I think in that context, a group of people operating like a platform cooperative, right, an ethics first platform cooperative,
First platform, yeah.
right,
Yeah.
could say all of this excess wealth, we will have debate, right? I mean, government's supposed to do this.
Correct.
I'm not as hopeful about reviving old forms of democracy. I am hopeful about inventing new forms of democracy.
I agree. Yeah, that
You know.
carry a lot of the initial code of
The intention, right? The ethical intention,
ethical
right?
intention, yeah.
Right. So, but with capitalism, the problem is everyone who is thriving in the current incentive system tries to tell you a lie. It is such an elephant in the room. It's such an obvious lie. Everyone knows it, but nobody sees any practical, like tangible way to get away from it. And that lie is, this is an amoral system. We're Switzerland. Facebook is not a good thing or a bad thing. We're just trying to make a buck, man, and we're trying to serve our customers, right? And that's not true. Facebook,
It's created a hyper reality, and now it's a blur where we're living, in that.
Facebook, it's a reality distortion field, as we say here in the Bay Area, right? But if you want to understand Facebook's ethics, do it for yourself. Look at the behaviors of the organization. Look at all of the resistance to anything that resembles trust busting or anti-monopoly efforts by all of the tech giants. You will see the ethics visible there.
The data hoarding, similar to the material goods hoarding by many other people as well. And any bit of taking the torch to try and burn off the bad parts of the consumerist, consumptive, materialistic behavior is automatically like, that's socialistic. And then
Stigmatize it.
Stigmatize it.
And when you have all the resources, you got really good PR. So manufacturing public sentiment is now a product on offer in a way that is far more powerful than at any point in human history. If you've read Thinking Fast and Slow, which I saw behind you by Kahneman, you know, once you apply that, like Nudge, right? If you've read Nudge, once you apply the insights of behavioral economics, if you have sufficient budget and sufficient insight into a particular target demographic, you can get them to vote in a particular way. You can get them to live on fucking Snickers bars. So one of the things I try to
meddling right now.
We are all coercing one another constantly, and it goes even deeper than that. We are profoundly shaping one another in terms of our own identities, individually and as groups, constantly.
Yes.
So if you can get comfortable with seeing that as a reality, which is what's in my opinion happening, I think you can start to get comfortable saying, you know what, man, I think more people should eat kale. So I'm gonna put that on the top shelf. I'm not gonna take away the Snickers bar, but it's gonna be hard to find.
Sure.
right?
Sure, and kale will be grown so abundantly that, and it will be delivered to you by drone/bot, whatever you want to say, and it's just so
Make
much
it easy to do the healthy,
sure,
sustainable
actually
thing.
it's free. Great, even easier. Yeah.
I mean, I'm joking with kale because it's like this
It's a
symbol of healthy shit.
Yeah.
But you can do that for thoughts too. You can
For
do
thoughts.
that.
Yeah, you can make it easier to find high value knowledge and harder to find derp content that has a very vapid. It's very vapid. Okay, there's too many cool things to unpack. Okay, let's start with the globe behind your head. Okay. So you started with this really cool way of understanding that it's a union. We have a union. It's a unity on this planet. We are one with the planet, the plants, the animals, the insects, the other humans here, and the amount of extraction that's happening from both people's souls and time, as well as from the resources of the planet for greed and excess, it's egregious.
The ethics of more is better says, do whatever you can to accelerate the pace and volume of transaction. Full stop. If you could get 1,000 people a day to come through your restaurant and throw all the food in the garbage, great, you're winning, right?
As long as they pay you.
As long as they pay you.
And the food goes in the garbage. Sure.
Capitalism incentivizes what I just described.
What you just described, yeah.
Right? Capital doesn't say, let's make sure every calorie nourishes someone. That would be a different incentive system.
Okay, so a lot of what we're talking about, and there's still so much more to unpack on what you were just saying, but a lot of what we're talking about is we have the current incentive system design, and there's portion that's great, incentivizing innovation, eradicating poverty, excellent. On this other aspect of the incentive design of the current ecosystem, we have some malevolence, some egregious behaviors, let's say. Now, the one that you're illustrating is this new incentive design, and on that one, we're trying to take the good code from the old one, continuing to incentivize innovation, continuing to incentivize eradicating poverty, the good stuff, and we're trying to eradicate the malevolent side of it, and we're trying to maybe keep people in stronger. We're trying to actually have more of the variables computed for the most ecologically friendly and most community friendly.
Right.
Yeah.
So the way I would phrase it is this. So some people, when they hear some of the things I say, they're like, this guy's a communist or something. I'm an entrepreneur. Nothing lights me up like, hey man, let's start a business. Or, hey, let's start an organization or a nonprofit or something. I get so excited that even when I'm just hanging out, having fun with friends, we're constantly jokingly inventing businesses and companies. The other day, we had like a 2-hour laughing till we were crying conversation about a whole new animated series called Combat Wombat. Why? Because it rhymed, and I just love wombats, they're adorable, right? So this is like part of my DNA. Here's what happened that hurt. Every year that went by, I've had some modest successes. I have had no runaway successes, but I've had plenty of friends who have. Every year that went by, I found it harder and harder to start again. If you came to me, you're like, hey, I got an idea. What if we did this? And I was like, why is it, Alan's a nice guy, why is it that I'm not psyched, even if his idea is good, that I'm not psyched to do it? And what I realized was, think of it this way, the monoculture, the global leviathan of capitalism, where everyone, it's like swim in this river or die of thirst. Take it or leave it, right? Every idea you have, even if it's a benefit corporation or a nonprofit or an NGO or a small business or something that could become a huge business, is in that sandbox. And every year that goes by, more people pee in the sandbox, and I don't want to play there anymore.
They're poisoning the river that we're swimming in.
So I love playing in the sandbox, right? And one day I just woke up after
dumping nuclear waste, maybe
Sure.
is yeah.
Right, but I woke up and I'm like, I can't. It's not that I don't want to. It's not. I'm not taking a virtuous stand. I can't play in this sandbox. It's gross. What do?
Yeah.
My only option is to imagine other sandboxes.
That make the old one obsolete. Yeah.
Mostly.
There
will always be capitalists, dyed-in-the-wool capitalists in the world. But if I got to die in a
it's
world...
2.0. We have to just make it clear that we can illustrate it in a way that takes even lots of people that enjoy the old infrastructures and give them
a good reason and an easy bridge to the new one.
Yeah.
You can still be an entrepreneur. Exactly. You can still have profit motive.
Yes.
But this new system, it's going to be hard to impossible to become a billionaire. But you could have such opulence of material. Who fucking cares? After $10 million, really, right? Like it's just ego, right?
Lorenzo de' Medici is still my favorite example of this 500 years ago in Italy, in Florence, where he had so much wealth and he patroned Michelangelo and Da Vinci.
Sure, yeah.
And so this is what I'm talking about is why doesn't the wealth just go to, the excess just go directly to the entrepreneurs and artists to help them flower?
Okay.
Yeah.
We don't have time for this conversation, but this is a great, it's funny you bring up Medici because I have a previous life. I left the art world 7 or 8 years ago, but I have a previous life in art.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that elite art, as it is experienced by collectors, museums, museum visitors, auction houses, auction house patrons, elite art today is horrible for a very specific reason. It has simply become an unregulated securities market. The would-be Medicis, right? The perfect movie for this, it was a recent HBO movie called The Price of Everything, right? And the second half of that expression is the value of nothing. The value of art is horribly lost in the morass of profit motive.
Oh, yeah.
I left art because nobody gave a shit about catharsis or awe or inspiration.
Yeah.
They're like, is this a good investment? And what you realize when you get into the art, what you get when you get into elite art, and elite art may be up here, and you may have wonderful idealists down at the bottom, but it's aspirational. They're all pointing this way. And a tiny percentage get there, and then they're like, oh shit, this is what it's about, right? They realize that they're just playthings in an unregulated securities market. So if you want to understand capitalism, I wrote a chapter about this in the book. If you want to understand capitalism at its most raw, without regulations, without controls, look at the art world, right? It just turns everything into an ROI. And when you become obsessive that way, you treat your spouse that way, you treat your kids that way, you treat your friendships. You don't understand why all this money and power hasn't brought you love and respect.
Damn, the translation of that to your family and to your friends.
It's the presiding ethic.
It becomes a presiding ethic. And it's in the sense that you're painting it, it's just made it so that, art lost the component of awe.
It lost integrity.
Integrity,
right?
Yeah.
So think of emotional and intellectual integrity. If I could snap my fingers.
And antiquities. Antiquities trafficking is like the fourth largest.
It's a great way. Art is a great way to launder money. Art is a great way to but
you're destroying artifacts of civilization for us to better
manufacture scarcity because it makes your thing more valuable.
So
and syndicate behaviors are not illegal either. Pump and dump behaviors that are supposed to get you in jail if you did them with securities are completely the norm in the art world, right? And so the art world is emblematic of this. All markets work this way, but what we do is we push back to try to minimize those excessive behaviors. And in the course of my life, I think we've failed. I think we mostly fail. All the pushing back and the regulation and regressive taxation, as the velocity of money and the impediments to its movement around the world continuously diminish, right? And the speed picks up, money just moves. So all of this, thinking that any nation, even the United States, right? That's why at the end of Thomas Piketty's book, Capital in the 21st Century, he says, we need a non-porous global tax regime, which I think is nuts. But
damn, non-porous, so money can't
so
just
no place to hide.
Yeah.
Everybody pays the same taxes globally. we speak as one, global civilization, and we say, and we create that. That seems insane to me, but I understand the impulse, and I think his insights. I think his
It's a very, very big picture, long now perspective on civilization. A lot of people also argue that these little city-states populating and people deciding with their own lifetimes and money where to go play and etc. Those will become the big one eventually.
I mean, we could all the whole world is more likely to look like the city-states like Venice in Renaissance Italy. I mean, I see that argument. Yeah, but
and maybe like a little Hong Kong or Singapore, these pockets, the Dubai, the special economic zones, these things.
Yeah, but these are all different forms. These are experiments in rigging capitalism to benefit an elite, in my opinion.
Sure.
Right? I was watching. There's a comedian. Remember Harold and Kumar? Remember White Castle? So one of the comedians, I'm forgetting his name right now. He just did a series on Netflix, like the big global beast that is capitalism or something like that.
Sure.
And he does this thing all about Dubai and how Dubai was just said, we would love to support your business in every way, but you have to let an Emirati own 51%. And it worked-ish for a while, right? And now they're getting external pressure to maybe drop that.
Okay, let's come back to the one that Ron, go ahead.
Can I ask a question before about the arts? Raman, what do you think of Basquiat? And do you think his work had the merit, or was he an artist just because he knew Andy Warhol? What's your thoughts on that? Is that a dumb question?
There have been these turning points in the last 100 years where visual art, I think, went wrong. I think Andy Warhol started off as a pretty idealistic and altruistic artist, like most artists, and everyone ignored him. And then he became a profound cynic, and he became rich and famous, and I think pretty miserable. And everyone looked at that and said, the market rewards with money and attention profound cynicism. Read some of Andy Warhol's writing, right? From A to B and back again, shit like that. Like, he was a cynical, bitter person, and won. And so every artist looked to that and said, that's how to win. And it's been getting worse and worse ever since. Basquiat got caught up in that too. He was part of that circle. Why were these people so much in pain? Maybe some of it was their past, but maybe some of it was their present and the cynicism that developed, right? I mean, as far as I can tell, and he's in that HBO documentary, Jeff Koons, as far as I can tell, he might be a sociopath. He is the apotheosis of Andy Warhol's cynicism. Warhol still hurt. Koons doesn't hurt. He's just maximizing his own benefit from the maximum commodification of creativity. Right? Did I answer your question?
Yes, in depth. I need to rewatch this again.
I mean, there's a fair number of artists out there who are rich, and you can just feel how deeply in anguish they are, because they know that their success is just feeding art and driving it in the wrong direction. It's driving it away. Before David Foster Wallace died...
One can say the same thing about the conspicuous consumption of the boats and the houses and the et ceteras, the sports cars, all that kind of stuff. The supermodels with bikinis and champagne and all this kind of stuff.
But you got to try it to know.
How insecure, as Obama recently said, does one have to be in order to need 8 women twerking around them? I mean, how ridiculous would this be to see wealthy women with 8 men in thongs twerking around them,
sure it's out
pouring
there.
champagne? I hope more people will see how ridiculous it is, and how these people have hearts, they have souls, they have talent, they have full flourish potential. We have to do this again because there's too much cool stuff to unpack, and it's really interesting seeing your background come to light here too with art, because I actually didn't see it in this lens. You shed a lot of cool light on how art actually had its own parasitic poisons poured into it that made the decrease in awe and increase in money and greed and whatnot that took away from the actual purpose of it. Also, this is seen all around us in just the way that we have more, like you were saying earlier, but there's so much sadness and anxiety and depression and suicidal thoughts and decreases in intimate relationships, ability to look at people in the eye and show them that love and care and compassion.
So the ethics of capitalism is you are a means to my ends. You are a means to my ends, whatever my ends may be. Maybe I want to get laid, maybe I want money. You're a means to my ends. And you can feel that when someone's treating you that way. If they're a little more savvy, you know what they do? First they say, let me help you fulfill your ends so that there's reciprocity. But it's still a relationship completely confined to the transactional.
Okay, but it doesn't need to be that binary.
It doesn't need to be that binary. I'm giving you the extreme.
The extreme, yeah.
Right? So, but
there's plenty of people that approach and say, like, let me help, and then they help, and then you help back, and then you also talk about things like their family and their values and how you can help them, and
it's a spectrum, right?
Yeah, exactly.
At one end is the person who treats you purely that way, and at the other end is the person who's completely opted out, right?
Yeah.
It's like somebody who takes ordination in the seminary or something like that, right? Could potentially be something like that. Yeah. I wanted to just say one last thing about the art thing. Before David Foster Wallace killed himself, he said, I'm paraphrasing, the most radical thing an artist can do now is single entendre, right? Be completely sincere as an artist is totally revolutionary for our time, because every artist is just burying themselves in one of two ways. Either I'll just create pure consistent product, or they are burying themselves in cleverness and double, triple, quadruple entendre of meaning.
Damn.
Right? And I think he was right. I think all the arts should take that look and get back to that place of emotional and intellectual integrity and total sincerity and say, you know what my art's about? It's exactly about what I think and feel about this world. Yeah. Right? And I think people would rally to that kind of art. Right?
If that is the ultimate, that's the ultimate way to be an artist as an agent in the world, is to be your ultimate fullest expression each moment in time to the next.
Yeah, just drop fully into it. So I just want to kind of close that loop on that.
Damn, because that applies to everyone now, even the ones that have accumulated so much radical wealth, is that the loss in humility, the propping up in ego and worship, and I want on the boat, so I'm going to do everything possible to get on the house.
Totally. When did humiliation become the path to dignity? Right? Yeah. Like, it's like when you go to the bar and for like a half hour you're trying to get the bartender, and the bartender's completely ignoring you on purpose.
Yeah.
And so your self-esteem's like this, and then finally they give you a beer. Right? And then
if you're lucky.
And you keep paying for that.
Yeah.
You know what you should do?
You keep paying for it with your time.
After 30 seconds, leave the bar. Go to the bar where the bartender's like, hey man, I'm gonna get to you in just a sec. I'm so glad you're here.
You're here, yeah, exactly.
Right? I'm gonna treat you with respect. The art world doesn't do that. The art world is also kind of an extreme place where you condescend to the person to such an extreme that you drop their self-esteem and you let them buy their dignity back through a piece of art. Right? And again, there's parallels in all kinds of things. It's I think, kind of obvious in fashion. It's kind of obvious in these sort of vanity things.
Yeah,
but it's in everything.
We need to get over the multi-$100 T-shirt era.
Buy your dignity, bro.
Buy your dignity. There's a radical wholeness that comes from humility and gratitude for just being on Earth and having great people around you. Okay, because we need to talk about this. How does the distributed ledger? How does blockchain technology come into play for the new incentive system design? Thank you.
Since leaving the art world in 2012, I've done a lot of work in the startup ecosystem here in the Bay Area. Some advisory, some consultant. Occasionally I'll take an in-house role or I become a co-founder. A little over a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, I was invited to do a simple few facilitations that I've developed over the years for a startup. And they could pay me cash, which was nice. thank you, better than private stock. And so we went into this process, and they loved it. Then I was offered a part-time gig. Then I was offered a full-time role, which I took, and then I was offered to become full partner. And this all happened super fast, and we raised a lot of money really quickly, mostly in cryptocurrency, which we all know how that's done. I was very excited and inspired by this for a variety of reasons. One, this organization was a benefit corporation focused on ESG impact, environmental, social, and governance impact. So they were going to take, and I'm going to answer your question today, they were going to take blockchain and use its ability to create cryptocurrencies to try to maximize the positive effect on the environment and on social and governance impact outcomes. So it was a wild ride, incredible. I was out of that back in August of last year, September, something like that. And that gets me to the second reason I got really excited about blockchain. And I've written a lot about this. There's a fair bit of it in the book I just put together. But essentially, the industry got co-opted because you could invent your own native digital currency. It got co-opted by an out-of-control frenzy of hype, greed, speculation, fraud, scams. And that's a tragedy because there's a more altruistic application, yes, which pretty much nobody's doing because it's not a get-rich-quick scheme, yeah, which can radically reinvent governance, the distribution, the exercise of power, yeah, the ability to direct and incentivize the flows of money, and it can be everywhere and nowhere, mm-hmm, right? So what does that mean? That means that, and I'm just speaking about the currency part, I'm not talking about the other things that an indelible digital ledger can do, because mm-hmm, we could talk about that for 4 hours. Mm-hmm. The currency part right now, the dollar has value because we all agree it does. Mm-hmm. The word glass has meaning because we all agree it does. That's a very important realization. The dollar's value is backed by our government. We believe in our government, which is another very powerful fiction that helps us all cooperate, right? You've all know what Harari works on, talks about this quite a lot. Mm-hmm. And so we all believe in this dollar, and it's pegged to the legitimacy of this government. There is no logical reason we cannot peg the value of a digitally native currency to real-time data about the health of the biosphere. Yeah. For instance. Yeah. Wow. There's no reason we can't peg a native digital currency's value and use to educational outcomes for women globally. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Right? There's no reason we can't do these things. These are hard things to do. Yeah. Right? So
teach us about how that's designed to work.
The easiest way for me to kind of unpack this for people is not by getting into the technicalities, because truth be told, we would run into the limits of my own knowledge as well. The way to invent, to architect and deploy alternative incentive systems is to do it collaboratively among a group of experts. And that's one of my aspirations of what I want to happen after the book.
Can you give us an abstract of how it would work?
Yes, that's what I'll do. Yeah. So in the book, I talk about meeting these two friends who work at the Nature Conservancy, Barbara and Steph, and we just slipped in this conversation, hours went by. And by the end of the conversation, we realized we had thought of something no one has ever done. It was exciting and intimidating. And that would be, there was a particular fishing village. Now, this fishing village's economy is linked to the health of the local fishery. If they overfish it, which they're always tempted to do, it will collapse, and so will their local economy, right? And so the Nature Conservancy has been working for a long time in this village with people who live there on the ground, trying to figure out, essentially, how do we create an economics of temperance, moderation, in the relationship between the village and the fishery?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
They are working on ways to get real-time flows of reliable data on the diversity and quantity of fish.
Yes, yes.
So imagine those data flows go into a little gamified app on everyone's phone in the town. The better the fishery does, the more cryptocurrency they get, right? The cost of that cryptocurrency, we issue that cryptocurrency. It's not very much. We have to develop the DApp. We have to make sure it's secure. It's not We have to think through, like, if you're a black hat hacker, how might you exploit this?
Sure.
But you peg that currency to the health of the fishery and the real-time data coming in, right? There's little sensors on the boats, all kinds of stuff. Maybe there's satellite data. And so anytime they launch the app, they see in real time how that fishery is.
Yes.
So there's peer pressure now, right?
They're getting an extension of the essence of the health of the fishery.
The health of the fishery, and here's free money.
Okay.
Fishery's doing poorly, free money goes down.
Yeah, but then don't they find another way to exchange value if they don't have the cryptocurrency that?
So the way I'm doing this by way of example. So the way we had imagined it is there's that relationship, that the value of the currency and the distribution of the currency for this little experiment within a tiny geographical area and a limited amount of time is pegged. And then we open a shop with staples that the people in the town tell us they normally use. This little shop will accept, say, Mexican pesos, but it will also accept our cryptocurrency. Now the cryptocurrency has gone from just an abstraction to something that's useful for material goods. And the hope would be to seed, with the entrepreneurial spirit, to seed a new microeconomy, because maybe someone up the street who washes cars says, I'll accept fish coin, or whatever we call it, nature coin, right? And we try different ways of seeding that local economy. And we can get real-time data and analytics on how it's working, or what's going wrong, or why did it collapse, right? And if it does, the town shouldn't be any worse off than it was at the beginning. And if it takes off, maybe we try it with a fishing village in the Philippines. But maybe we have to adjust it for the culture there.
Or just deliver them clean meat grown in bioreactors as soon as possible. That's another fun alternative. I
hope I answered your question.
I'm always thinking that way. And I'm very interested to unpack the ways of designing this incentive system using distributed ledger technology that I think has a lot of potential. And like you were explaining, there's micro deployments, and then there's global deployments, which I'm really looking forward to what it can do. I think another thing on top of like doing something like delivering clean meat across the world is just the sincere self-work, that if humans just did a better job at prioritizing sincere self-work, parents teaching kids that, communities teaching kids that, and just really working on that from the seed level of just tuning inward, reflecting, morally and ethically evolving, we wouldn't have the parasitic poisonous roots poisoning the rivers and doing things like the overfishings and all that kind of stuff. But there's
you'd have vectors of failure on that. I mean, it takes a tiny number of people acting very, very badly to ruin it for everyone. So, I recently had a conversation with Robert Sapolsky, and I think the reason he took some time with me is because I said, Robert, I read your chapter in Behave on game theory. There are many, many, many ways to incentivize sociologically, economically, biologically, everything, to incentivize freeloaders, bullies, thieves, a lot of bad behavior. There's a much narrow set of ways to incentivize altruism. I would like to talk to you about how we might architect incentive systems that optimize for altruism.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So I took a bunch of notes.
And it does really require that deep moral, ethical framework for every seed that comes in to want to play altruistically because others play altruistically. And if you're birthed into that world and there's hopefully up to a certain point no bad actors, which I think some of the social credit system is actually causing in itself is the removal of bad actors, period, which is very crazy. And we're not just talking Sesame Credit in China. People think that that's what people talk about. We're talking about fucking Twitter and YouTube and all of the platforms here. They're doing the exact same thing. Yeah. If you're not following, you become censored, and that's it. What do you do after that?
Grab attention.
And then you get censored from the payment platforms as well. And when you get kicked off the payment platforms, then there's no way for you to earn money.
What are you incentivizing? I think so. You know who solved for this in a wonderful way? I'm reading a book right now called Moral Origins by Christopher Bain. And about 15,000 years ago, human tribal culture solved beautifully for this. But they solved for it at the scale of, say, 20 to 50 individuals. And so there's I think, strong evidence that they were fiercely egalitarian. They were actually extremely non-hierarchical. They were very different, for instance, from baboons. And the reason we were that way back then is we learned to hunt animals that were bigger than us. And we all benefited from that fat content, and our prefrontal cortex got thicker, right? And there's no way you alone, no matter how strong you are, going to take a mastodon.
Correct, yeah. It
Right?
required 10 to 20 and setting a trap.
Working
creative
together.
Thinking, yeah.
And then, but if you dealt the killing blow, you are really tempted to become the alpha male.
That's right.
And what happens in those contexts is everyone shames you terribly, and the meat is taken away from you. And so this is still seen in a lot of hunter-gatherer tribes in present day, right? And if you still got really arrogant and uppity and hoardy, right, we would banish you, which was almost as bad as death, right? And if you were still proudful in those contexts, we murdered you.
I know, but I'm just thinking that the stick, right, just to put, you called it a maximum wage earlier, or there's like the other one, which is to be like, you're buying your fifth house where, we're censoring or whatever it may be, the banishment. It's just the evolution of the ethics and the morals from internally to not even desire to get the next the seventh property or whatever, that to cycle that money to artists and entrepreneurs.
You can let
instead.
it happen. You don't have to go full prohibitive, and you don't have to go genocidal. What you can do is you can imagine an incentive system that
just think of what brings you more meaning is the big thing. That's really what it comes
to. Not everyone wants more meaning in their life. So imagine an incentive system that constantly drives wealth to the middle. That's not what we have now. And regressive taxation, that's a post facto way to try to solve for that. Right? It's not built into the system to drive wealth to the middle.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. And to uplift the poverty. Yeah.
I guarantee there's enough brilliant minds in the world that if they heard the words I just said, could invent that.
Correct. I'm writing about that as part of what I'm working on right now. We're in the same ballpark. This is why we have to have another show to talk about this in more depth.
Sure.
It's these incentive systems are the solutions to some of the poison that we have poured by accident into the river ecosystem.
Here are the three existential. What's that guy, Daniel Schmachtenberger? He talks about the generator functions of existential risk. Here are the three things that are suicide in capitalism as it exists: hyperconsumption. We calibrate for that.
Yeah.
That's infinite GDP growth on a finite planet is suicide, in my opinion. We're not going to somehow dematerialize our way out of that. Wealth polarization, more and more poor people, slight uptick in rich people, no more middle class. That's also suicidal. That always ends like the Bolshevik Revolution, always.
Of a species bifurcation.
It always happens. And then the tragedy of the commons. So those are the things to solve for. Here are the two things that are super hard. See, I hope this book leads to a foundation where we get to architect and deploy experiments.
That's right.
And I want really smart people to join me when I eventually get there, I hope.
Yeah,
but
you will. Keep going.
Without brilliant people who know lots of things I don't, the first experiment will never get out the door. So I hope some people will join me.
We will keep doing this, yes, yes.
So, but the two things to solve for, which are super hard and is a challenge I offer to everybody, is calibrating for altruism. How do we deploy little experiments to where in every way people are rewarded for altruistic behaviors? And hoarding behaviors or psychopathic behaviors, and I would argue psychopathic behaviors are heavily rewarded in capitalism, because when you detach empathy, right, and you're able to go robotic and have a firewall, right, that's an advantage. That is a strategic competitive advantage in capitalism. Right, you're more, if at the very, very top of the Fortune 100, incidence of psychopathy is higher than in the general population by a lot, because it's an asset, right? What would an economy look like if there was a much higher incidence of altruism at the top of that economy? How do we calibrate for that? So the first one is, how do we calibrate for altruistic behaviors?
Yeah.
And then the second is, how do we create an economics that calibrates for modesty and consumption, a temperance economics?
Yeah.
Right? So that you're really disincentivized to hyperconsume and hoard. And it's almost impossible to wallow in abject poverty. anywhere on Earth.
Yes.
Right? So how do we build those things?
Yeah.
That's what I want. That's the main thing I want to
Why?
do.
Then we'll all just be full of shit.
I don't know what you mean.
You know what I'm saying?
I don't know what you mean, Ryan.
How do we incentivize altruism through some sort of capital gain?
Sure.
No,
I don't know,
You don't understand where I'm coming from.
No, Ron, you're making a good point, which is there is a very poisonous way to architect this, which will leave everyone full of shit. Then there's there's a very interesting way to architect it, which is when you come from a place of self-work, when everyone desires to be altruistic themselves without even if the incentive system's in play or not, then the incentive system being in play makes it even more fun to play in this system.
It's accelerant for the best angels of every person's nature.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We're going to fuel that because right now we often are fueling some of the people's worst impulses. Right? Children learn through imitation and trial and error. Right? And for example, I remember when I was a kid, I learned walk into the room, fake it till you make it with bravado, and suddenly everyone will fall into line. And you know you're not as smart as these 6 people. You just were like ballsy, right? And so there's a lot of perverse incentives there, right? And a lot of that has to do with being a white dude and the privilege that comes with it. You know, the same kind of strategy might not have worked if I'd been born into a different body.
We're passing down the cultural systems to the next generation, and we got to rethink the incentive systems design. This has been such a fascinating conversation, so multivariate. I love it.
Sure, thanks for having me.
I'm excited for another round. Quickly on the way out, you're talking about altruism. I do think, eventually we'll also talk about like influencer marketing and AH Global and stuff. I think it's very interesting to potentially have, we were talking about this, to have these high stake influencers desire to be involved in more propagating more of the altruistic small dogs.
Yeah, I want to. So my role as a partner at AH Global, my aspiration for the company. If you look on the website, you'll see big Fortune 100 clients like Coca-Cola, like you mentioned. And I don't see how you are an altruistic company when you're obviously contributing to an explosion of diabetes, right? So I would like to drive our business in the direction of people who are propagating altruistic behaviors, who are driving people towards healthy behaviors.
Yes.
We're doing all those kinds of things. So those are the kind of clients and influencers I'm looking for that company.
We're excited to
They should put the
unpack that
Coke
more.
back in Coke like they did before. Right? Same.
Whatever is in that nowadays, absolutely.
Right.
Two quick questions on the way
Sure.
out. This is simulation, so we must ask you: are we in a simulation?
I saw you do this with Andrew Yang. So I thought about it. So my first thought, best thought, Suzuki Roshi. It doesn't matter on one level. On another level, and we don't have time for this, I thought about the Fermi paradox, Drake's equation, and technology.
Yes.
And if you look at the arc of technological progress and you extrapolate, all technology is essential, greater and greater control and adapting matter and time and space to our preference. So on an exponential curve, what does that mean? That means we get to invent universes according to our preferences.
Yes.
Right? Like literally, if there's such a thing as a multiverse, maybe civilizations invent other universes and can navigate to any place in space or time within that universe. So that's one wild extrapolation. It's a good premise for a science fiction story. The Fermi paradox and Drake's equation talk about where are all the alien civilizations, and my opinion there, we had a guy at one of my good people dinners, a good friend, Greg Dellery, who runs a private space company called Heliospace. He was a prof at Berkeley, and they build instrumentation and sensors and things that go out into our solar system. So they have like NASA contracts and things like that. And he came and talked about it. And the way I think about that is civilizations have lifespans just like individual organisms. And what we're watching now with technological development is, imagine you handed out a red button to every living person and said, if you press it, all life ends. And then every decade or century, you give them another button with the same power, right? So the vectors of civilizational suicide proliferate and distribute.
Yes.
Which means, statistically speaking,
Yes.
end of all civilizations end. And I think there's a good chance that's true. And I will fight like hell to help us figure this out.
Likewise, yeah, that may be our roles in this game.
But
on this
then, but we may just end ourselves anyway.
That was a very strong synthesis. Very, very strong. Okay, and because we'll riff on that more next time. And the last question that we ask on the show: what is the most beautiful thing in the world?
The most beautiful thing in the world. There's two answers to that for me. Being with someone you deeply love and respect, where that's reciprocated. So for me, the person I think of is my daughter. I'm just a better, larger person when I'm with her. And then the other thing is, connecting to the natural world. Yesterday I was up in Lawson Volcanic National Park.
We love Lhasa.
With more snow. I think it's the most snow I've ever seen, in my life. And they plow all the way up to the visitor center, and then after that, it's closed. I can show you these photos. It's total ecstasy just to be there and look around and walk around and snowshoe and and it's humbling. 20 to 40 foot walls of snow. It's pretty amazing. I was impressed that the visitor center could carry the weight of the snow I saw on the roof. It was almost completely buried, right? They have to shovel out so that I guess you don't suffocate when you're inside there. And it's a giant building. Yeah.
Those are powerful. There's something profound about getting the young people that are building the future to pass more time with children, because then they can feel that essence of that youth and really have a greater stewardship, I think, for Earth. Raman, what a freaking pleasure this has been.
Thank you for having me.
This
Will
has
you
been
come
so
back,
fun.
Raman, and talk more to us? 'Cause we didn't cover a lot.
We have another show we'll have to schedule together soon. Let's make it happen.
Yeah.
Let's make it happen. Thank you again for coming on.
Thanks
Such a
for having
pleasure.
me. Yeah.
Such a wealth of wisdom. Super excited for more conversation soon. Everyone, we would love to hear your thoughts on the episode. Give us your thoughts in the comments below. Also, check out all of the links below. Good People Dinners, AH Global. Also, check out Raman's website. He's got tons of great writing assets on his Medium. Check that out. That link's below as well. Also, huge shout out to Ron Vargas for producing and directing. We love you so much. Thank you, Ron. And everyone, support the artists and entrepreneurs that you believe in. Go and support them, help them grow, help them prosper and flourish. Our links are below. If you believe in us, support us, help us grow. And manifest your dreams into the world. Build, create, execute. We love you so much. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you soon. Peace.